to Test This, the podcast designed to help software testers understand risk and adopt new testing solutions with ease and confidence. Your host is Mahamadou, a quality assurance consultant with over 10 years of experience across multiple industries. In each episode, he'll talk to different experts and learn from them about how they test.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of How to Test This. Today, I'm happy to welcome Greg Paskal. Greg has over 40 years of experience in quality assurance and test automation. He is the founder of Craft of Testing. He is the author of Test Automation in the Real World, which has insights from these decades of experience in testing. 20 years ago, he created the popular MEST and recently MissionWares AI framework. He founded Test Lab and also Open Test Technology Forum to encourage collaboration and equip others with a testing foundation. And he just completed a 2.5 years engagement training women QA and automation in Rwanda, Africa. He also a frequent speaker at Test Automation Guild, Start East, Start West, and QA Trailblazer. He believes that great automation engineer must first be a great manual test engineer. This approach is to focus on risk reduction and protecting the company's brand through strategic planning. And this mission is to help engineers build world-class QA teams and test automation best practices. So welcome, Greg. Thank you for being here.
It's good to be with you today. I appreciate it. I'm happy we could connect to share and talk with your audience today.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. So today we'll be mainly talking about how to test with the MEST framework. We'll start with your career journey on how you become a tester. Then we're going to talk about the common problem you see in the software testing industry. After that, we're going to talk about the solution you propose, which is a MEST framework. After that, we're going to talk about how to become a great engineer in practice. And we're going to also talk about your work in Rwanda, training QA engineers. And finally, we're going to end on the career advice and future of QA. So does that work for you?
That sounds fantastic. Well, it's going to be a good journey on this talk. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So let's get started. First, can you tell me about how you got into software testing?
Well, I, like many quality engineers, have always been a very curious person. I have found that seems to be a common trait of people who get into the work that we do. They were that person who tore everything apart as a kid to try to figure out how it worked. And for me, I was very similar to that. I had a very great fortune to meet somebody when I was fairly young, still in my teens. And we volunteered together actually to work summer camps for kids. And I had told them about my electronics background and tech background, and he invited me to come and apply for his company. And I was amazed because it was really an incredible company started by a man named Howard Hughes a very long time ago, called the Hughes Aircraft Company. So I did. I wound up hiring into that company when I was 19 years old, I believe. And I was actually a clerk to begin with. Can you believe that? My whole job was to take blueprints and take them to the scientists and to the different engineers that were building these systems where we would make satellites and launch them into outer space. It was incredible as a young man to be involved in work like that. And I didn't mind it. I learned from everybody I could get time with. The scientists were just some of the most smart people I'd ever met in my life. And I found I was very humbled that they would take time to talk with me and answer my questions as I wanted to understand things better. I went straight really from high school into a trade school right into this work. I kind of skipped the whole college thing altogether and was much more of a hands-on sort of person. And then I had Mama do one of those really fortunate opportunities where I was reading a lot of the things that were on my desk, and I was working with a woman named Ruth in our clean room, which is basically a room where you wear a white cap and you kind of have this thing and all that. And she was assembling parts for these systems under the microscope. And I heard her say, "Oh, darn it, that happened again." And I asked her what she saw. And she showed me under the microscope. I looked in there and there was a little hole that had, as she was welding on a microscope, that had been generated and caused a problem in what she was working on. And I happened to have the blueprint of the tool she was supposed to be working on because it was my job was to manage these things and get them to the people. And I noticed that the tool was slightly modified from what it probably started off to be. Well, I shared that with my boss, and it turns out that this problem had existed for a little while, and it cost about $1 million every time the bug showed up. And it turned out that I found basically the bug almost by accident. It was my first defect I ever found. I got a promotion right after that from clerk into a role officially helping in a lab testing. Isn't it ironic how something like being a clerk led me into testing? But I'm really thankful for the opportunity. I think for a lot of our listeners, you may think about your first work that you did. You never know where it's going to lead up. But that's where I started actually, right? My first test automation, believe it or not, was testing these components we would launch in space. We usually created two of them, and one of them was on Earth, and one of them was floating around in what they call geosynchronous orbit. And I needed a way to have a computer go measure values and output it in a way. And that first code was written on Apple IIs, really old computers, and I wrote much of it in a machine language, and it had to be very fast, and it was amazing. So my journey started there, and I just realized I love testing. The more I got into it, I loved blending the ability to take a computer and automate something to validate something, acquiring, going to a place, getting a value and saying, is that the right value, or at least sharing it, which is really no different than current day test automation. And so it was really logical as the tools changed to just continue to follow that path. And, then many years later, I found out there was an actual, like you and I know, a science called quality assurance. And here I am today, probably one of the biggest advocates for it. I really love this space and what it offers. So that's kind of my journey, how I got into this work and where it's led me for so many years.
And how did you become like test automation specialist and also public speaker?
Yeah, well, um, I think even going back to that first code, that was 42 or 43 years ago, believe it or not. I wrote my first automation code. The same problems exist today. So it's funny how the same kind of things are there. But as I progressed officially into tools like Windrunner was one of the very first test automation tools I used, I saw that the tool itself was a tool. It's kind of like if someone hands you a wrench and you start to hammer nails with it, you realize, well, it has mass and it can do that, but it's not really designed to do that. And even using a tool like Windrunner, which was designed for automated testing, can be used incorrectly if the methodology and your approach is incorrect. I have found that to be true all through my entire journey from Quick Test Pro into Selenium. The same problem happens in Cypress. The exact same problem exists in the latest tools with Playwright. So why I like this story as much as it has an unfortunate side to it, it has a bright side to it. And that is some people look at the tool as a means to solve a problem, but the problem is almost always solved by a methodology, and the tool is just what you bring along to implement that methodology. And this is probably one of the first errors I see most folks make when they get into test automation is they ask, what's the best tool? And I always tell them it has nothing to do with the tool. It has everything to do with this tool, this amazing mind that you've been given. This is where you're going to win or lose. It doesn't matter what the best tool is. That applies in AI and applies in all the things that we work with as engineers. This remarkable capability for us to reason and consider is going to always make you a head and a leader in what you do beyond being a tool specialist. Anyway, so I love the automation space. Windrunner is really the first time I'd ever heard when I got into that about the craft of quality assurance. I'd never even heard that term before, maybe 25 years ago now. And I work a lot in Selenium these days. I honestly have found no need to move around. I've worked with Cypress, but I have had no need to move into Playwright or those because I can do pretty much everything very reliably in Selenium, and so there's been not a great need. Again, I can if I need to move there, but it's just a tool, so I don't need a new wrench when I've got a really effective wrench. And that's how I do it today.
Okay. And what problem did you see that make you become the founder of Craft of Testing?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm also a teacher at heart. I love spending time with people and helping them. And so I wanted a platform where I could work with folks like you, Mamadou, and my engineers that I worked with in Rwanda, and thousands of quality engineers where I could share what I've learned along the journey. So I put craft testing together so that I can make short videos. Most of them are probably 10 minutes long, maybe 15 minutes, that would teach them everything from like what I just shared with you. One of my very first YouTube videos was on how to create good locators or good selectors, if you want to call it that. That if you could watch no other video than that, that might transform the whole way people the success they have in automation. And I kept adding to it over time. I would find a tip, and I'm like, this is one of those ones that the community generally doesn't know about, or they try to solve it through yet another tool or whatever. That isn't a real tool problem, it's a methodology problem, and I've created another video. And so I have a pretty decent number of videos there that will give you a good foundation. And I've tried to make it really easy to get to. So if you just go to craftoftesting.com, it'll direct you right into my YouTube channel. That's by design.
Okay. And working with so many companies over the years, what is a common misconception you heard people having about test automation?
Yeah, the first one is the first one all of us have heard is it's somehow going to replace manual testers. That is ridiculous and the wrong focus. I would say so much if you're interviewing for a company and their intent is to automate everything, that's a huge red flag. You're about to get kind of set up in something that's not going to be very fun. But these tools are marketed towards people who would believe that. That's the realities of marketing. And you hope that your executives have enough common sense to realize the magic bullet, kind of the silver bullet, enough to see it and like, I've heard this pitch before. I'm not going to buy into it. I'm not going to put someone's feet to, creating the miracle. That is by far the most common one is we're going to automate everything so we don't need humans. Very naive, completely inaccurate. The moment you build automation is the moment you maintain automation. And so that's a very common one. The other thing that I really dislike, and it's somewhat of a myth, is automation is going to help you deliver things faster. To this day, 40 years later, I have never once seen that be the case, and it's because um, automations automation does something really good. It gives you regression insights. And I want to talk a little bit that for a second, Mamadou. The word regression in our field of quality assurance is kind of a catch-all. People, for the longest time, I heard it used in the context of we're going to run regression testing meant I'm going to run everything. That's the most common misusage I've heard of that term. But when you really get down to what's the purpose of regression, what does that word really mean? Well, if you think about something regressing, all it means is you started off in one state and it got into a poorer state somewhere down the road. That's the definition of a regression. And the only way that you can derive that is if you remember. So you have to either have a photographic memory. Hey, that test or those steps took this long to run, and now it's running longer. So now I'm regressing up. It's taking longer to run. That's a true regression. By the way, the test passed in both cases. So regression always requires historical analysis. You have to know what it was at one point in time and what it is now in this point in time, and to determine, has it gotten longer to run? Maybe things have started to fail later on down the road. That would be a hard fail. But real good regression testing actually will indicate there's a problem before there's ever a failure. And this is a very big misunderstanding a lot of quality engineers and QA managers really suffer from, is this idea that the only thing we want to test is for failures. That's not the case at all. True regression is always about a historical analysis from one point in time to another and to see what the differences are. And that's what I call a soft fail, and that's where the real good bugs lie. It tells you something's coming before it really fails. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, yes, it is definitely. And you're also saying to be a great automation engineer, you must first be a great manual test engineer. Can you
Yep.
talk about that? Why it's so important?
Yeah, why it's so important is people wind up in the role, unfortunately, of QA and automation engineers for all the wrong reasons. I know I've worked with HR teams, and someone applies for a role as developer, and then they, whatever reason, don't have what it takes to get into that role. And the next thing you know, HR is saying, "Well, we got this thing called QA over here. Why don't you do that?" Most folks at that point realize that'll just get my foot in the door, and I just want to get in the door so I can get back into being a developer. I never hire folks that started with the intention to be a developer and got into QA as a second place. What I really want when I hire a QA engineer is I want someone who loves to take things apart, to learn how they understand how they work. I want a lifelong learner, and I want someone really curious. So I when I meet with them, I ask them very open-ended questions to see how do they reason through things, if they can identify patterns and problems and things like that. So I think when it comes to being a good test engineer, when you're a good founded test engineer, now you've got the skills to build automation on top of that. If not, what happens is you begin to build test automation to be passing automation, not testing automation. You see the difference in that, Mamadou? Is if I build a passing test, its whole purpose is to have a green check mark at the end of the test. But if I build a testing test, I don't I don't so much care what comes out at the end. I just want it to be accurate, because then as a quality engineer, I can take that information and make an assessment I can deliver to the manager or to the lead or whoever I need to get this information to say, a week ago this test was running like this. Today it passed. It just took twice as long. That's a failure that you and I, Mamadou, would pick up. But if someone went right into test automation, they might just consider that a pass, but you and I would consider that a failure, that we know a risk is on the way. You see, quality assurance is about risk assessment. It's not about testing. Tests and experiments and things we do along the journey are just the tools we use to assess the risk of how the application is working. And so this is why I always want to find good quality engineers that I move into automated testing. I almost always build them here, look for those that have that additional skill set, and see if they can move into the automation space. My favorite engineer to work with.
Yeah, I totally get that. And that's important to have a strong foundation and mindset to start testing for automation. And I think that's what we see frequently. Like most test automation efforts are failing and they are not worth the ROI. So can you tell me about that and the consequences?
Yeah, the ROI is such a good point. You brought it up. The moment you hear we're going to automate everything, I would start looking for another job. If you have management telling you to do that, they're going to be up for a huge disappointment. It causes this problem when you start to head down that road, that you haven't done a very good assessment. So some things are very good to be automation candidates, and other things aren't. And there are many things that you just need a human's mind and eyes and a brain to look at and determine, is this correct or not? But I think that automation's best place is in regression analysis. So you really want a test that runs exactly the same way in the same environment every single time. Because remember, you should be tracking the result data and then looking at it tomorrow or the next day or next week or month out to see how is it trending. I'm actually building a brand new tool right now. I should share this with you real quick. Believe it or not, all the automation in computer lives on this little thumb drive right here. And I hope to have these available for people to purchase not too far down the road. It's more for monitoring, but it provides insights when data starts to trend in the wrong way. And it starts to help you where you're going to start to see where the regressions that are going to be a problem at some point in time.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my opinion on it.
No, that's definitely that's a good point for you bringing up. Another also topic we talk a lot about, it's AI and lot of risks introduced by it. And at the same time, there's management pressure to implement it. What's your take on that?
It's funny that management comes up again. I mean, we all have to work for a manager, right? AI has become, of course, the latest buzz. We all know that. Hopefully, Mamadou, in 5 years from now, if we were to watch this video, we'd realize that the world has kind of come to its senses a little bit. But, a lot of executive management is being highly pressured to save costs, which is a good thing. And AI is being marketed as, the magic solution that's going to do it all. I am positive that will not be the case. I've watched enough trends in technology to know that it will be a great helper and will be a great herder. At some point in time, we will find some very detrimental things. But again, I look at it as yet another tool that's available to me. So AI, I use it almost every day, but I love it from an analysis perspective, although I have another article I'll probably share with you based on this.
And a last problem I want to touch on before we move on to the next section is like the role of tester doesn't get the respect it's supposed to have. What do you think about that? Is it our fault? What can we do better to showcase our value?
Yeah, Mamadou, this is a great question. I think, and it ties into something we need to talk deeper in with AI, especially right now. But the work of quality engineers, again, if you've come into this work as secondary to what you really wanted to do, I kind of encourage you, go find what you really want to do and find that role. For those of us that really love the work of quality engineering, pay attention. I need you to really listen to what I want to share. There's always going to be a tool or something that can potentially make your job easier. And there's nothing wrong with that when the tool makes it easier. But I think that there is a problem when that tool synthesizes a version of you that isn't true. And of course, this is why I tied it a little bit to AI. You still bring the best value and the best capability by the things that your mind and your brain and your eyes and your reasoning bring to the table than likely any tool is going to do. And that includes AI. I believe that. AI, remember, only consumes what already exists, and it only repeats what's already been said before. That's not where the innovative edge of our engineering field exists. It's never built on, I've already heard that before. We've already said that a million times. It exists where the edge is, and then we push our craft, we push our engineering field into new places of thinking. And so for our quality engineering community, like, it's going to be really easy to present a version of you that isn't you, and it could even impress your manager. It could impress the boss, but it's really not promoting the craft growing deeper, the craft of testing growing deeper. If you're obsessed with test cases and test planning and running tests, but you're not in love with what we do as risk assessors, you're leaving an enormous part on the table. And it's actually the most interesting part of our work. So a work of quality assurance should never be for the lazy person that couldn't do this or that. It should be for that person that wants to be an advocate for their customer and for their brand of their company and their executives. It's hard. It's hard. Now, this role requires a really strong manager. Okay. This manager's got to be able to back you up when you find risk and issues where you've got to call the baby ugly. This is one of the unique things about our role is it's kind of like being a policeman. If you think about a policeman, they can't come in and say, well, we're not going to worry about much about traffic violations, and you can steal sometimes. And we've decided to arrange like this. No, law enforcement has kind of a set of rules you expect. You expect honesty and integrity, and I know those things should be compromised. But most of the folks in law enforcement follow a standard set. Quality assurance is exactly the same. It follows the ability for you to be brave enough to say, something's not right here. I found a defect. There's a risk in our process. There can even be a risk in our leadership. That's a hard one to speak to because these are people who are probably paying your paycheck. There's a risk somewhere along this journey. And so it needs to be kind of a set of moral guidelines, some integrity guidelines that we follow to say, I will always tell you the truth. You could decide what you want to do with that truth, but I will always be the one that's going to share, this password and user ID authentication piece is unencrypted. That means data is in the wild. You should likely not ship this because it has a huge risk to our customers. You need to be able to say that. I have worked with some great quality managers and very compromised quality managers. I call them managers. They start there. Not all those managers are leaders, and they can bow to pressures of all kinds of things, wanting to move up the chain. If their whole world is looking at what they're going to become next and what they're in, they're probably not a good quality manager. You need somebody who can back you up and realize when you identify risk, they're going to be there to cover you. And so this is one of those spaces that I think I want to appeal to our audience is, look, if you're in this for the free ride, I don't know, find something else and get off here. We need our community to be solid people that really believe in integrity in the work that we do, but we need the innovators too. We need the people that are thinking about how do we assess risk better and better. We are at the precipice of this with AI. I just wrote a new paper and Mamadou, I sent you the link to it. It's off of MissionWares called the Silent Confidence Framework. It identifies 6 defects that exist as we speak this moment in all the AI deployments. These are actually bugs that exist in these tools that will produce the wrong data and the wrong results based on things like their overusage of Python, which is a language a lot of us know, but it has some great weaknesses as a language. And it introduces some of these defects. So here's a great example. We're right on the edge of a new technology usage of AI that opens up a whole new area of risk. It's not that it's bad. All things open up risk. It opens up a unique set of risk. And it's good that we are aware of it. We need people to be thinking about that, not beating it up because we're afraid we're going to lose our job over it, but to investigate it so we can say, here's where the new risk lie with the usage of AI.
Yeah, totally. And now let's talk about some solution you propose. You are the author of the MEST framework. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, METS came out of some work I did while I worked initially for a company called Kinko's and then it was bought by FedEx. At that time, my very first time I'd ever actually been called a quality assurance engineer. I had been doing plenty for decades before that, but now I had the role of that. And I was over our website at the time. It was called kinkos.com. And whenever, like any of us who've done work with anything web work like this, when there's a new release they want to do, you're usually given a little bit of time to verify nothing broke. And I started to realize that those time frames can be very short. And I found some really interesting defects through that. And so I realized that it really was out of my control how much time I was given. And this is one of the groanings of most of the quality engineers that are on watching this right now is, oh, you gave me a day. I need a week. I need a month. We always want more, Let's face it, that's one of our traits as quality people. We never can have enough time because all defects can't be found. You always want one more.
Yeah.
Well, what would happen if we decided not to fight that, but to realize that's, that is just a reality.
Yeah.
And this is an example of what I call a METS grid. You realize how easy this would be to make in Excel. That's exactly what I made it in to begin with. So again, the magic isn't in the tool that it's written in, it's the methodology of what it brings. When I started to comprehend the fact that I would never have as much time as I would want, I thought, well, then how do I prioritize what I should test with the time that I do have? And MET stands for Minimal Essential Testing Strategy. It just means if I was only given an hour a day, a week, or whatever, what would be the most important to the least important things I would test and where would I focus? And this functional test grid here is just a very generic one, but these can be created for all kinds of things. Matter of fact, I was just asked about maybe doing a workshop on this again. I've taught this at the STAR conference and in the Pacific Northwest Quality Conference as well that Philip Liu teaches or puts on. This test grid, you can see, would be just for testing a basic, maybe an e-commerce website. It's meant to be very generic. Usually these are very specific and specialized to the application, but you get the idea. If someone gave you an hour to test a very basic website, let's say some kind of shopping cart website, you could take this grid and go down the different categories of accounts. There's carts, there's catalogs, there's ways to find stores, things like that. And then there would be critical, high, medium, and low tests that are already determined. So for accounts, can I create an account? Is it logging in possible? If you were only given an hour and someone gave you an update, you'd want to at least check those couple things. And you can see as time, you might have more time, you might move into high and medium and low. So really METS as a concept isn't that complicated. What the trick of using METS is all about is being prepared when it shows up. So I generally tell people just doodle this on a piece of paper. I started with just a yellow tablet on my desk and I started writing in, oh yeah, remember, next time you test, verify that things in the footer are correct or that the links can click or whatever. And I kept building and building and building. And this evolves over time. This is just one METS grid, but of course there's been thousands of them made, and they're usually very specific to an application. And that's really how METS came about.
Yeah. And it got very popular as well because it's been used by company worldwide and
Yeah.
also recognized and taught by ASTQB as an effective manual test strategy. So that's a big accomplishment.
It's amazing that the spreadsheet has evolved into this. You're right. It's used by companies all over the world now. Emirates Airlines uses it. There's some, I don't know. I meet them at the QA conferences all the time. Like, we're using METS. And so I really like it because it can complement your existing test strategy, but it just basically gives you a prioritized list of what you're going to test. Because really the other side of that is test everything. And, that's unrealistic all the time. You can't always test everything. As a matter of fact, it's not even smart to always think you should test everything. Better to use my brain and say, all right, well, we just updated login and authentication. Let me focus there. Right. And then I'll do some residual things around it. That's how METS came about. People can find out more about that at metstesting.com. And I have a whole Udemy course on it as well. It's less than an hour long.
Definitely, I will link to it. And another framework you created, it's one related to AI because, as we said, there's many risks related to it, security vulnerabilities, AI being kind of a liar, and many other problems we can discuss if you have time. But you developed something called the MIAI, so MissionWares AI, to ensure consistency. Can you tell us about that a little bit also?
I love that you would ask. It's kind of one of my newer thoughts, one of my newer tools in my tool belt because of this methodology mindset I have, which is you really accomplish things great in your life when you have strong methodology, and then you find tools that can complement doing that job well. So I'm a big believer in getting good tools. It doesn't always mean the most expensive tools. As a matter of fact, I build a lot of my own tools, even on the Mac. I'm just working on a new tool right now called Repomon that's very helpful to me. But MAI just really stands for MissionWares AI. About 3 years ago, I decided I really wanted to put AI to the test. At that time, I was solely using Copilot, and I wanted to create an app. I've got another fun link for you, actually. I think I'm going to put this out there called stargate.missionwares.com. You'll get a kick out of this one too, Mamadou. This was the result of me deciding I'm going to build a project and I'm going to totally let AI do most of the dev. It took about 3 rewrites of this little, I don't know if you could call it a game / screensaver, but it's kind of a space game to do it. It was very inefficient. It probably took 3 or 4 times longer to write because I did bring AI into the mix of it. But through this project, I started to recognize that I had a standard I wanted to set that I wanted AI to operate from. For one, this tool continued to apologize profusely at every turn. It was wearing me out. It would say, "Oh, I'm so unworthy. What did I do?" I mean, we've all heard it kind of self-deprecate like that. I'm like, stop saying that. It was one of my first rules is stop beating yourself up. it just takes time away. Let's just stick with trying to solve the problem. And out of that, I came up with what I call the MAI framework, which is really based on two pieces now. I suspect there will likely become a third. But the first piece is what I call the MAI methodology. And I think that what I see AI tools doing now with skills and things like that, this was really kind of before the skills concept came in. And maybe skills will be what is called down the road. I don't know. But before that was there, I had to kind of have a name for it. So I call it the MAI methodology. And it's broken down into things like, how do you present yourself? How do we solve problems? How do I want you to document things that I need to see so that we can discuss it? What kind of comments do I expect? And right now, that's about 10,000 lines of Markdown that are across 12 different files. That's pretty big. Like METS, it evolved over time. And when I find a little gap somewhere, I'm like, we keep bumping into the same problem, I'm able to enhance my methodology with it, and then introduce that whole methodology. I don't use skills files or any of that. I do it completely through two main markdowns. Like I said, the MAI, it's just called the AI directive for methodology, and an AI directive for the mission of what we're trying to build or solve. So the methodology, are you surprised, Madhu, after I share this with you, is how I want it to work, how I want to collaborate with it, has been a game changer for me. And it's evolved over time to become really, really efficient. I look at it as a partner in the work that I do. I spend a lot of time talking about architecture back and forth. What I really like is I'm discussing architecture, we're refining the process, and then summarize it before we ever build code, because I'm very much a coder too, as well as a tester. Of course, the mission part is essentially what we might call the requirements. What are we trying to build here? And what's our goal overall in this particular project that we're working on? And that's my MAI methodology. And I really believe it. I would say it's kind of it's not a secret sauce because everybody knows about it now, but it's a tool in my arsenal that gives me an advantage a lot in the work that I do.
Okay. And let's talk about how to implement it in practice. What will be the first steps for a team who would like to implement MEST framework?
Yeah, to put the METS framework in place, literally, check out the metstesting.com site. There's some templates, but lots of people just open up an Excel spreadsheet and they create a couple different columns. The first one is category. The next is critical, high, medium, and low. Category, I like to most consider that in areas of functionality of an application. So consider like an e-com application. You're going to have accounts, you're going to have carts, you're going to have catalogs of products that you can buy, you're going to have checkout. Come up with really basic categories to begin with. You probably, a good app was not going to have more than about a dozen categories. So if you find it's growing crazy long, you probably got too granular. Step back a little bit and say, well, what does this all roll up to? And then begin to identify, well, if I just had an hour to test, what would I want to make sure that works with accounts? I'd want to make sure I can create an account and I can log in with an account. And then, maybe you'd say later on, well, I want to be able to reset a password or things like that. Those might not be as critical. The biggest temptation most people have is they think everything's critical. That's really common. So you need to step away from it. I can work on METS for a while. Then I need to get away from it for a while because I get too into the weeds. So make sure you take some time to do a little bit, step away, go have lunch, think about the bigger categories, maybe come back and add a little bit more. And the best thing I would tell you is don't try to build it in one setting. In almost all cases I've seen that done, it results in it looks like it's all filled out, but it's completely unusable. METS should literally be something that sits on your desk and that you have there to reference on a regular basis. So I literally print it out. There's a copy sitting on my desk when I'm working on a project. That's how you start.
Yeah, great. And also another higher level question I wanted to ask you earlier. So you had many roles, like even director of QA, leader, architect. So what's your tips to build a culture of partnership working with the different teams like dev and to implement a QA basically? Because earlier you said how you hire. So how do you build a team after you hired it?
Yeah, I love building teams. I like building them from scratch if I can. Of course, who wouldn't? But then I get to build the kind of team I want. One of the most popular talks I've ever given at STAR is called The 7 Fundamentals of a Successful Test Team. And I think it resonates with the audience so much because they're all scratching their head trying to wonder, like, how do we make this thing really effective? I think that language is the first thing. I want to make sure we speak all the same terminology. This is one of the things I like with ASTQB, but let's face it, there are other testing methodologies out there. That's perfectly fine. Whatever you settle on as your methodology, just make sure your team speaks the same language. I'll give you a good example of that. I was working for a company that had a different definition for bug versus defect. The first time I came across that. And so I'm like, well, we need to kind of figure this out. We either need to settle on that or not. But to me, when I think about ICQB, there's a defect, there's a defect, there's a defect. A bug is just slang, what we use. And I like that slang, but there's no difference between the two. And so this is a good example where I wanted to make sure we're all talking the same language. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the word happy path come up. I don't like happy path at all because it has a problem that it narrows you into what's the other opposite is sad path. Well, most defects are not found at either of those ends. Most of the defects are found at the transition points. And so I don't like that terminology. I think of positive, negative, and boundary testing. That's the definition that will keep you with the right sort of vocabulary that lets you exercise our work well. So when it comes to building a good team, I'm always looking for the curious. I like people that are humble, that show me they're willing, if they make a mistake, that they can talk about it. The best leader I'm ever going to promote in my teams is always going to be a leader who can ask a question to even a junior saying, I'm not sure I understand. Tell me more about that. I like that. That means they have enough humility to recognize when they're wrong and they can learn more. If I've got a more senior person, I'm looking for that. I don't want someone who's going to kind of lord their authority over people. And so those are some few things that I like. Of course, I like to have collaboration between teams, but I want to make sure I cover my team well. So I've got their back. If they have to make a hard call, I will be there to support them. While I might report to other management, kind of the buck stops with me on if someone wants me to compromise our work. This is an awful part of the landscape of what we work in. So many people, again, wind up in roles of management that shouldn't be there. QA management is just the same. You've got folks that it's not that it's just that's not the right role for them. This has got to be someone who's really got a strong sense of integrity and will cover your back when you've got something that you've got to share as high risk. All right, so weak managers don't work well as QA managers. They've got to have that sense that they'll stick and fight for you. And so I can't emphasize that enough because I've been burned by that. And I know what it's like to work for a weak manager. It's very hard in QA space because you're constantly identifying risk that can even reflect on them or their leaders or their managers. And then that could be really tough.
Okay, so we talked about many things, how you hire your teammate, the methodology you use, how you build a team, not to automate everything, but how do you decide what to automate?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked that. This comes back to METS. So when you think about METS, now that a team has got it in place, what they've identified as the criticals are the first candidates I consider automation candidates. I also believe that they need to write manual test cases. So I know people that I hate manual test cases. I believe manual test cases are important because it's the only way you can repeat a test the same way over and over. You know what? People don't like to do it. They like to write scenarios for all kinds of reasons. I've heard them. A lot of them are pretty lame excuses. But when you write a test case step by step, it means you perform the test the same way step by step because the automation is certainly going to do that. It's not going to deviate. And so once a test case is identified as critical or high on your METS, those are the two that I always have the test engineers document the manual test steps for. And I mean, this is a step-by-step. There's no scenarios involved here at all. There should be no interpretation. Those become the candidates for test automation. Now, the good test automation engineer looks at that and says, all right, I can automate this. The locators or the selectors in there are pretty solid that I can create. I have a course. Are you surprised? I have a whole methodology. I'm building those. It's on craft of testing. And they know they can get it in place and it will run, they can run it every single day. That's the thing about automation is once you build automation, you should run it every single day, sometimes a couple times a day. Don't put it in the wings and bring it out the next release. There's this magical thing. I don't know what you want to call it, but when automation seems to sit on the shelf, it gets stale and it stops working. Once you build it, you've got to maintain it. You've got to keep it going. So think of it like something you're exercising, right? You've got to bring it in there and it's got to go out for its daily run and it keeps it healthy. And you as the automation engineer know like this thing runs like this every single solitary time. It's consistent. And boy, when you match that up with METS, with the highs, and the critical tests, you now enable the quality engineer, the test engineer, with some very powerful metrics, which they might have missed before.
Question about how to implement MEST in practice. What skills should testers should develop according to you?
Oh, so skills. Well, they need to have some technical skills. At the very least, your QA engineers should, especially if they're working on anything on the web or even mobile. But if you're working on web, you really need to understand HTML and probably JavaScript. At the very least, CSS, of course. Anything related to web technologies, you need to at least have some basic understanding of what's going on under the hood. You shouldn't be so like, I have no idea how this, when I click this button, what is it actually, why does it even open up a new page? You should know these basic things. You don't have to know it when you come in, but it should be part of your professional development to continue to increase these skills. It would be a requirement if you were on my team. I would be looking for you to grow in those things. When it comes to any new technology you're working with, like AI, there's a heavy leaning on Python. And as I discovered and as I wrote in this article, the Silent Confidence Framework, Python has got some fundamental weaknesses as a language that aren't to say it's an awful language. It's like, but you need to understand what those weaknesses are because AI is running things through that language and it can produce inaccurate data, which is important for us when we want to validate values. So being a good quality engineer means being a good technologist, a curious technologist wants to grow in your craft, should love to share. I actually taught a public speaking class to my QA engineers that wanted to take it because I wanted to encourage them the ability to be in front of in a meeting and share the defects that they found. And a lot of them are really terrified with that idea, of course. But it's good to have some comfort in being able to present and to write and share these sort of things. Have you ever made it to the STAR conference, Mama Dan?
Not yet. No, never. I wish I could do that.
Have you ever heard of the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference by Philip Liu?
Not yet. No, I didn't.
I would suggest the Pacific Conference only because it's a small conference. The reason I like that conference so much, it's the most hands-on QA conference I've ever been to. It's small. It's in Portland. Maybe 300 people come. And a lot of them are giving talks, kind of like what we're doing. They're real practitioners, but it's got this kind of like, let's sit at the table and share notes with one another.
Okay, this is the last part of the interview. We're going to talk about how to develop as a tester. You talked earlier about your engagement in Rwanda. Can you tell us about it and what you learned from it?
Yes. Oh, I had the great pleasure of working with these women in Rwanda, Africa. I had found out about this organization many years ago because they asked me to come in and train the METS. And then I didn't do anything for a couple of years. And then I had an opportunity to join them for the last 2.5 years. I just buttoned up my time. It was amazing. I buttoned up my time with them, though. It was time for me to move on from that role. It's in the city of Kigali, which is the capital of Rwanda. And I went there with my wife. It was amazing. My first time in Africa. I didn't know what to expect. I love the country. It's an incredible country. It's obviously gone through quite some tragic turmoil in its history, but it's it's just something about it, the people there that I really loved. And the vision for this company, the company's called Marajo, was to help equip these women with a skill that could be really life changing for them, a technology skill that not only for that moment, but would really have a generational impact going forward. And I really love that mission a lot. I had my very first class of 4 automation engineers. That's when I started. I taught them the basics of automation in Java. We worked in an automation framework, was one that I've kind of evolved and moved through the years. And but it's real solid. So we learned Java together, and it just was fantastic. A couple things that I learned about QA engineers that I wouldn't have known if I had not done this work in Rwanda was culturally, culture matters when it comes to a person's kind of natural drive to improve themselves. In the West, where I live in the US, you encounter all kinds of engineers. Some have a very entitled, like they owe you, you owe them everything and whatever. There's could be a very lazy engineering mindset here, which is whatever. I just this is all I want to do. I don't want to worry about anything else. And let's face it, some of those traits are generic to all people, but culturally, I found Rwanda to be a real eye opener. What I found there in my engineers were very humble, very hungry, and very driven engineers. Some of the very best test automation engineers I've ever got to pour into and help to develop are in Rwanda at this day. That includes all of them I've worked with here in the US. They're that good at what they do. And I think what it comes down to is they're very driven. These ladies were very driven to do it in excellence. And I was really proud of them for that. You know, one of the interesting things I've learned about the country of Rwanda was, of course, it went through a very awful genocide a little over 30 years ago. And when their president kind of came into being after all of that, he realized they did not have a lot of natural resources, but they had one resource that they couldn't deny, and that was it's their people. And so he really instilled into the people, like, you're our resource. Let's allow people to recognize our people as extraordinary people. I encountered those extraordinary people. And so I have a whole team of engineers that I've had this great pleasure to work with that are there in Kigali. And I'm excited for the days that you all get to meet some of them. You're going to find them extraordinary in their work of QA and test automation. Yeah.
Okay, looking forward to it. And how do you see the role of software tester evolving over the next few years?
Well, I don't think that AI is going to replace us. I think that's our biggest worry for most of us. I think that we're on the other side of what they call the hype curve of the technology. Matter of fact, it almost seems daily I'm hearing more and more people coming to the reality of, oh my gosh, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. But we climbed the curve together. We were up here at the top, and everybody's like, this is going to save everything. And now we're kind of coming down the other side. So for our QA engineers, please don't give up in our work. And remember how I said, you've got to be a practitioner. You've got to dig in and lean in on this. Understand what AI does. Don't get lost in the terminology of it. It's ridiculous in a way. They're reinventing all kinds of terms, and they seem to have a love affair with the next name they're going to call something. In most cases, it's something that's already been long well invented, and it's just got a new name for it. And AI is actually not that complicated to understand how the AI concept is working, as much as it's being sold as this extremely complicated thing. If I came to you and said, once upon a Mamadou, you would probably say time, right? Because you've heard that phrase said so much. This isn't much different than what all AI engines are doing right now, is they're predicting what's the most logical thing to come after what you want to do, because it's scraped the entire internet and every other source it can. And remember, it doesn't think. It's not a thinking. It's the I in AI is an illusion. There's no intelligence there. It is simply an aggregator of large amounts of information and matching what you just asked with that large amount of information and what's the logical conclusion to it. That is the simplest way I know to explain AI. Once upon a time, that's exactly how an AI engine works. It just looks for the next logical thing. And so try to step away from all of the words. One of the common pitfalls I see with AI right now is kind of like people one-upping one another with terms where they learn some new term and they just they want to lean on that somehow that elevates them as being smarter in this space. Why don't you do the opposite? When you hear a term, try to simplify it down to the easiest way you could teach it to somebody and learn it. It's going to benefit you and your colleagues as well. So I think that's going to be a lot of our future. I think that we need to keep curious and on the edge. There's some neat things coming. Some of the stuff that's happening in quantum physics is really remarkable to me. And when it comes to just what's going to be happening in networking and other things like that is really remarkable.
Okay, got it. And for people who are struggling nowadays in the job market, do you have any advice for them as well?
Yeah. As of at least as of June of 2026, LinkedIn has become flooded with AI content and AI images. I would always encourage you to use a tool like LinkedIn, and who knows whatever its predecessor might be. But at the moment, it's really getting watered down. Remember that most people acquire a job through somebody they know. Very rarely does it, come from a blind application. It happens, right? But you're much more likely to find a job through somebody you know who can be an advocate for you. And it's really worrisome right now because a lot of companies have trimmed jobs because AI was going to supposedly do it. The reality is a lot of companies have now starting to realize, and you're hearing they laid off too many people. And so make sure when you get back into the seat, you present a real practitioner, not just somebody who uses AI to generate a bunch of test cases. It's ridiculous. Use your brain to generate what's the right thing to test. If you're wanting to just generate a lot of quantity of something, you're only hurting our whole community going forward.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful advice. Where can listeners find you other than LinkedIn, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find on LinkedIn. You can also find my website at Greg Paskal. It's GregPaskal.com. But I have a lot of people like yourself, Madhu, that we've connected on LinkedIn. And I always love to meet with our community and get to know people. So if you write me on LinkedIn, you'll probably get a response. I always try to do it. And I really love growing that community. I think, again, LinkedIn is, I want to take a little deviation here, but LinkedIn, like other platforms like Google, and I think Facebook is doing the same thing. They're having to learn to filter out all the AI generated content. So hopefully LinkedIn will redeem itself at some point, won't be so noisy. But that's a good place to meet with me and connect with me as well.
Okay, thank you. That was my last question. Anything you would like to add that I did not ask you about?
No, I mean, I have my book out there, Test Automation in the Real World. You can find on Amazon. I have my METS course. It's on Udemy as well, METS testing. You can go to metstesting.com and link right to that. I would say keep an eye out for the new things that I'm inventing. I am very much an inventor. Like I said, I've been working on this little device here where I've taken my Java framework and rewritten it in C++, and now runs in here, and you access the whole thing through a browser. It's meant from a monitoring perspective. I would love to find some new gigs. I'm really in a new season now where I'm looking to align myself with maybe some companies that just need someone to come in and coach their team a little bit, maybe for a few hours a week, or just want to do a little bit of an update, get them to a new skill level. So if you're looking for someone who can help you with that, I'd love to hear how I could do that and how we can work together. Again, reach out to me at gregpaskal.com. That's my email address. And maybe we can find something out. But it would be a pleasure to work with with you all and see how we can get your quality game even to the next level.
Okay, so thank you again for your time, Greg. It's been a valuable conversation. I've learned a lot from it. Thank you for sharing your 40 years of experience. It's helped a lot, definitely. For those interested, I will share the different links from your LinkedIn, website, courses in the show notes so people could find you easily. Yeah, and you're very responsive, so thank you for that, and very active also in social media.
Yeah,
So thank you.
absolutely. Well, keep an eye out. Oh, hey, I forgot one other thing, Mamadou. For those of you that are interested in some training, check out ASTQB.missionwares.com. That's a free tool I created just for those of you that want to learn, want to get your arms around some testing terminology. I wrote this tool for my team in Rwanda so that they would have a tool to get their CTFL. But it's free. It has all the certifications out there, and I hope you'll find that useful to you as well. It's a pleasure to make it for the community.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll definitely share it as well for those interested. Okay, so that concludes today's episode. Hope you found it valuable. If you did, please share it with your colleagues and stay tuned for upcoming episodes. We'll continue to learn from experts about how they test and how to become a better tester. So I'm Mamadou. Thank you again, Greg, and see you next time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.